Can anyone hear me?
I can.
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. Hi.
Hi, Pauline. This is a crowd, isn't it?
Yeah. Where's our
Yeah.
host?
Isn't Jim hosting?
Yeah, he's
That's
supposed
what
to. I haven't seen him appear.
well, the logos popped up, which I assume is Jim and or Ann.
Oh, okay.
How have you been?
I've been good. I kept forgetting to attend any of these meetings until the last one, and I thought I better do that one.
Yeah, every one of the live ones, I had another commitment I had to be at. So
Yeah.
thankfully this was available, and maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Remember getting participation for the program planning part of the year was always a little bit of a challenge, you know.
I know it's done differently than it used to be, so it's
Yeah.
hard to. I tried to think of what these the three things we might work on this year. That's how I was thinking of it. It
Accountability.
hasn't changed too much over the last few years, really.
No, it hasn't. Everything's at a high threat level.
Oh my gosh. Ex- Red alert, I would say.
Oh, I've been on a news diet for a while, but I still have New York Times digitally and the Star, and even just riffling through those things online, it's just like I want to look away everything that goes by.
I I've just stopped listening to the 5:30, to the national news. I just don't want to hear it. But I do check internet. I just check mainline Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC,
Yeah,
and the Star.
just NPR, PBS.
Mm.
It's kind of it. And for NPR, we watch NewsHour on Friday nights, and that's it. So we
Yeah,
can,
that sort of thing I can't take because it disturbs me so much hearing the name of the president over and over. I think I find psychologically damaging.
yeah, it's hard to listen to. At least they will put more things in there, and it's good to see
Yeah,
the two commentators that are usually there, Jonathan Capehart, David Brooks, same people, and the quality reporting on PBS between Jeff Bennett and Amna Voss and the other people are really, I mean, just it's Nick Schiffer and all these guys are just the best.
yeah.
And so, lots of international stuff, but just it isn't a single ingredient broadcast, put it that way.
That's right. It's so in depth in more than any of the others. So.
Yeah. So at least I feel like I'm not eating junk food, but
Mm.
you know. So quartet now. Teresa,
So
I
I
haven't met.
haven't attended, yeah, I haven't met you all. I haven't attended one of these before. I didn't really know what to expect, so I thought I'd dial in and listen in and
Sure.
yeah.
How long have you been a member?
So only since like December probably.
Okay.
I'd listened to honestly, the reason I joined was I've always loved the Vote 411 information and the um like town hall style back and forth. And I think those are always super, super valuable. So
Yep.
then after the election, I thought, well, I think it's time I go ahead and join and do something. So I
Appreciate that.
did. And I don't know that I guess you guys seem to have been around a little bit longer. I'm not quite sure like how everything works, or I've just listened in to a couple of meetings, and um yeah, I mean I think like registering the newly naturalized citizens to vote, that sounds amazing. And I think the vote 411 is super valuable. And they said something, I've been skimming the weekly emails that come out, but I don't really understand a lot of it. It's a lot more detailed and more, I guess, advanced than I understand, but they're interesting to look at. So I just kind of dialed into this to see if I could get another little
Well, good.
data point to understand what I've gotten myself into.
Well, Pauline's been a league member for what, 50 years, Pauline, at least, maybe?
Well, 1976 was when I
Well, so you're coming up.
joined the league.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
I'd like to have your
Teresa,
anniversary.
the reason I joined back in 1976, I was interested in the Equal Rights Amendment, and I was kind of looking for an organization that supported that. And at that time, the League of Women Voters sponsored presidential debates. So that was how I heard about them. So that was kind of why I joined. I really feel I'm a person that feels I need to learn more about issues in politics and current events to be a better citizen of the United States and a better voter. I mean, I have specific, political view, but and the league is real good about educating, I think, on different issues or trying to. So we have, a Thai programs that try to explain issues and stuff. So I think you'll enjoy it, And I know it's a little hard to get into because it's kind of complex the way it works.
But
It's a little bit complex and oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I I agree. I always thought we need mentors for each new member. Because
well,
I'm
there's
still learning. I've been in 3-4 years.
yeah, and there are the new member things that Laura Mountjoy conducts. So
Yeah.
you can attend those. And I think there's such a variety of things, so just grab something that interests you and work that. Show up at meetings, read the newsletter, or and check out the website, which has become over the last 4 or 5, 6 years much, much better place to look at events and find out information and join committees and all of that. So it's got a lot more features. I'm the past president, as it turns out, which was 2 years of jumping off the deep end. But it was kind of, looking back on it, it was sort of work, but it was a lot of fun. And it was really, I'm really glad I did it. Anne is a superstar at being president, and she grew up playing league as a little girl. That's a true statement. But I think it's the kind of thing you can take as little or as much as you want out of it, and get the parts that you enjoy the most, and hang. It's a really good organization. Just really can't say enough about it. And we've grown a lot for some reasons we're sort of mentioning earlier. We didn't say exactly that, but and so and luckily, I think we've seen the age of members come down a bit. The average age is a little bit lower now than when I joined 7, 8 years ago. And that's good. And so we're seeing a wider range of people involved, and that's always good. So anyway, it's a great place.
Yeah.
So Teresa, you can be president. That's how you learn everything.
Whether you want to or not.
That's how that, generally works. You do know a lot after that. Yeah.
Hey, I think, sorry for joining late. I was having trouble getting onto Zoom, but I'll make a pitch for being secretary is I'm concluding my second 2-year term. So, and I found a member of the league that being in this role was an absolute fantastic opportunity to find out all about it. I mean, I knew generally the history of it, but the workings, the machinations, the intricacies, and the continued history was really great. So I'll make a pitch for that.
Yeah.
I thought Jim
Yeah,
was
you guys are very
doing this session.
dedicated. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I right now, I'm involved with Observer Corps just as an observer. So I attend the Hickman Mills School Board meetings and the Independent School Board meetings. On the Forums Committee. So when we have elections come up, I volunteer to moderate a couple of the candidate forums that we have, which is always very interesting, actually. I do adopt a poll, so I try to convince members to work at the polls and then donate their pay back to the league if they can, but at least to work at the polls, because I think that's a pretty eye-opening experience and satisfying, if not exhausting. It's a long day. But
I bet.
so there's a lot of things, and then I've done a little bit of registration, though not as much lately.
Yeah, you guys do a lot of good work.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, the Pauline's comment about learning more about government and the whole civics and history sort of thing is so critical. Our biggest wish is we could get a lot more younger people tied in on and to appreciate that, because I think that's where we're going to see a slippage in participation.
Yeah, well, I've had people ask me about it and, you know, express interest. So maybe,
Well,
maybe one good side effect of all of the turmoil in political discourse
Well,
right now is that
that's
people are
where
getting,
our growth jumped after 2016
I bet. Yeah.
and has continued to do so.
Well, that's a tiny little small side, bright side.
Yeah,
Teresa, if you haven't read on our website, there's a history part about the League of Women Voters, telling how it began and stuff. And I think you'd find that interesting to read as background, you know. And we have positions that we support on things like civil rights and environmental issues and, you know, international issues that have
education.
been prepared through studies we've done over the years. And that's kind of one way we work is we study issues and the league creates positions that then they can lobby for and support. And I know that's kind of complicated sounding, but I just suggest you might read the history of it, which is online, and that might give you kind of a starting point to seeing how we operate or how complicated it is, because it came out of the suffragist movement, you know.
Yeah. Well, I guess one while we're just chatting here and killing time, I guess so I watched online the meeting last month about the Equal Rights Amendment. I mean, which was interesting. Um, but I don't think I have enough background knowledge to understand why that would like it was interesting sort of as a history lesson, but I didn't quite understand the connection to now. Like,
You
Well,
did.
is there something going on with it? Or
well, yes. First of
is
all,
there
it passed several years ago. Finally, they got enough states to ratify it. So as Biden was going out the door, he said, by the way, this is the law of the land. Okay. Well, as a technical matter, I guess one of the things the archivist does, National Archivist, is get it actually in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution. That hasn't happened. That's purely a technicality. The real issue is, now that we have it, how will government actually start to use it? Will it
Good
start to get
afternoon. Let
tested?
me apologize. In my brain, I had this at 2. So
Hi, Jim.
Aye.
Hi, my brain works the same way.
Oh. Yeah, I think
It's cold out.
gone are the days when my brain worked well. So, okay, so
Good thing we're working together.
well, I'm trusting that most of you are not going anywhere today. So,
Oh, I am.
oh,
You got a
I'm
bunch
in
of young-
Mexico.
you're in Mexico. Okay, well, that's
Whereabouts?
The country of
I-
Mexico,
Like Guadalajara.
the city.
Very nice.
And it's unbelievable how warm it is here today.
Well, it's very believable.
We
It's
we
way
don't
south.
want to hear about that.
Crazy.
Yeah, Kathy, what's the rest? We're on our way.
Do you spend winters down there? Hopefully.
January and February,
Wow.
the worst part. I hope by March 1st she'll be turning into better weather.
Well, next week, we've got 50s and 60s. It's nuts.
yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Let me set the timer on my. So first of all, welcome to all of you. Oh, there it is. Oops. Okay. So the first question is big picture item. What we want to see is what we want to know is what are the 3 things that you think are the most important for the league to be focusing on?
So have you got a stack of those in the hopper there for us, Jim, to multiple choice it or?
So we're kind of wanting to get your, what do I want to say, unbiased opinion. We don't want to lean you down a path because you may have something that none of us have ever thought about. So,
I'll jump in, okay?
okay, Pauline.
I think it's our long time one, voter rights,
Okay.
supporting voter rights, that's going to be even more under assault, I believe. And also I don't know if that's supposed to start this year, but the league has a national, I believe, study on the judiciary. I don't really
Yeah,
remember
that's
if it's
actually,
the federal judiciary or just judiciary in
no,
general.
I think it's a federal, and that has actually begun already.
I think that's a priority for our league to get involved in that study.
Okay.
If, you know, if that's for this year, I don't know, but I want to do this study.
Well, we use that at national level study.
It
Yes.
is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So are we focusing on local today or national or?
So we're focusing on what you want our league to focus on. That certainly can be participating in state or national issues. So like Pauline said, the study on the federal judiciary, obviously the National League is doing that so that we can have a national position on the federal judiciary. I know that several of the things they've talked about include term limits for federal judges, changing the the sometimes obstructive role that the Senate has taken on federal judicial nominees. The death of Scalia and that sort of fiasco after that comes to mind. And then I think the other thing obviously is an ethics issue with, some members getting chastised for accepting $23 worth of bagels while other members take hundreds of thousands of dollars of gifts and whatnot without any recourse. So I think those are the three things I think that study is going to focus on. And I'm agree with Pauline. I think that I would like for our league to be very much engaged in that. I think that's one of the more critical. Obviously the federal judiciary is one of the three co-equal branches of government, and if we're not supporting that, then
I kind of looked at it from a different way. Maybe I didn't understand it, but to start with the real basics so that we can be broader and get more done is like number one is membership,
okay.
because we're really good at thinking of all these things. I'm on a lot of committees and
Okay.
we're spread thin. And so membership, money, fundraising, because you need money to do anything.
Okay.
And for me, it's voter registration. That's why I joined,
Uh-huh.
because, if people don't vote,
Well, voter registration for sure, and of course, more people are registered than not, but it's turnout is where the real numbers are. And so, mine is kind of a blend of whatever it is that gets turnout combined with civic education, basic civic education around electoral involvement, so that kids coming 18 and beyond are clearly know the reasons why they are voting and are pulled to vote by the fact that their voice matters, or things that they recognize need to be handled better and so forth. So whatever it is that stimulates higher civic engagement at younger ages.
So would you be in that context, would you be looking at partnering, like developing some programs that you could take into high school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, something that and not in the league could certainly be the impetus, but I think to the extent that we had any number of good allies that spread the appeal. The appeal, I think, I'm making this up as I go now. The appeal meaning that they see a broader base of local recognized entities supporting it. I mean, we always look at people like the Chiefs and the Royals
Okay.
as people that would be, have a big voice and therefore could be very valuable in holding that message, along with partners like us or AAUW or I don't know who else, but there's a lot of that. So, but with the central end result of increasing younger turnout generally, but younger would be one of the hopes.
I know with Get Out the Vote, I'm on that committee, on subcommittee to get out to a lot more of the colleges this year. But there are, I forgot how many colleges in Kansas City, in our area.
Yeah.
We've got quite a few, yeah.
There's quite a few.
Yeah.
It's a really fun thing to do. And the kids are really open, but it just takes a lot of work.
No, I having been a high school teacher, I think that the young people are currently very politically engaged, not for the reasons that we would expect them to be, but they're particularly in terms of gun violence and environmental issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the two that really drive young people. And I think unlike what we're seeing now, I think they're much more agreeable to DEI
Yes.
programs and whatnot. I think that's even among some of the young people I know who are otherwise fairly conservative. The whole DEI thing doesn't bother them at all. They're like, yeah, that's more power to to helping people be people. So, okay. So a lot of focus then is what I'm hearing on the actual sort of encouraging voting through programs to register voters, programs to get voters out, civics lessons in high schools and maybe college classes and things like that. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I would think that maybe another aspect of that would perhaps be social media.
Let's add one other thing to her, which may be obvious, but it's not about election day. It's about all through the year. In other words,
Yeah.
how to pay attention. Yes, we want you to vote, and we want you to have a lot of issues in mind that concern you. But you know what would you do between elections, whether it's contacting representatives or whatever it is, whatever other parts of being a voice, that it's not just a election day focus.
Yeah, that's and I believe in that so strongly that almost all of my my other life is writing partisan articles for my hometown newspaper, and almost all of those end basically with saying, you cannot sit on the sidelines. You've got to reach out to your representatives. And I really believe that's a functional tool that's lost. I think so many of the young people, they shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, I don't know why I'd get involved with politics because, it's all rigged and
Well, if they would read and you can follow mainstream media and get a lot of good information. For example, the whole Doge thing, basically blew up the Capitol switchboard.
Yeah.
They had 40 calls a day, and suddenly they had 1,600 a day. They had 10 million plus calls about issues related to Doge. And, that's off election, but it's prime time, so all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that isn't social media.
Yeah.
That's direct action without jumping on Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
Well, and the one thing I will say is that I do think we need to be conscious of people who are not mainstream media savvy. In fact, I had a conversation with one of my adult children who's in her late 30s, who is not a conservative person politically at all, but does not trust mainstream media because they filter the news, in her opinion. And she wants to see the raw stuff so that she can make her own mind up. And I said, well, but then that means you have to vet the raw stuff. And quite frankly, you don't do it. And that's a frustrating thing for me as somebody who, knows how to vet. I mean, that's part of what I do when I write a column is I vet it. And so that the information I put out is good.
Mm-hmm.
And she was kind enough to show me the border being overrun, and which was something that had been vetted by mainstream media, which was why they weren't showing it, because it was actually 15 years old and it was a border in Eastern Europe that was being overrun. It was not the southern border of America. And so, I do think we need to process that not everybody relies on mainstream media. But yeah, no, so a lot of focus on voter registration. And I'm sorry, I don't know Kay Marhinsell. I'm not sure what your first name is.
Kathy.
Kathy. Okay.
I don't know why it usually comes up on there, but
okay.
I had to sign in and everything's a mess now. I'm sure I have to start over.
Okay. Anyway, so Kathy, I think you brought up money.
Yeah.
And you said that in terms of fundraising. So you'd like to see the league have sort of more money to put into resources for.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pretty hard to do anything without money. Our last election, one of the most successful things were the handouts we gave out about what was going to be on the ballot.
Voter
Uh-huh.
guides,
And
yeah.
it costs money, but those were just, some states provide them.
Yeah,
Ours doesn't, or, you know, or money to get the state to do it, but it was still hard to get people's attention very far before the election. I mean,
yeah,
they were a week before, you couldn't give them out fast enough, but before that they were kind of, but it takes money and we don't really have very much.
okay,
And we, you know, I'm not a fundraiser, but that's what organizations do. I contribute to the league personally because I know you
Mhm.
just have to have money.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Good.
We certainly have had some successful programs where, like as you point out, sometimes they cost thousands of dollars to get them off the ground. So,
So
Teresa,
if I could add,
huh?
I'm a very new member. I just joined like in December, and I think
Oh, we're glad to
just
have you.
from, well, thank you. Thank you. You all have been very kind. Um, and I guess just from that perspective, so one of the reasons I got involved was because of the Vote 411, and I thought
Mhm.
it was just very, and I've utilized it over the years for a long time, and find it to be very helpful and very easily digestible. And I think if you were talking about appealing membership wise to a little bit younger crowd, I think one of the things that is a little bit of a hurdle is time and time management. And what I'm looking for is something that can tell me succinctly what I want to know. And then I joined, and I feel a little bit like I'm drinking from a fire hose. Like, I don't really understand what's going on. I'm not really sure about what all the programs are, and there's a lot of emails, and I'm sure they're all filled with wonderful information, but I
A lot.
personally find it hard to digest. And so, from a new membership perspective, what I would find to be valuable is like almost an executive summary. This is what's important. Um, I have 5 minutes. What can I read? And I don't really have time to sit through a 2 hour meeting. I don't really have time to like go to 3 different meetings a week, and there's all these committees, and I don't really know what all the committees do. And Laura did, I spoke with Laura, she did a wonderful job of like, you know, giving me a little bit of an overview of everything. Uh, but even then, like that conversation, like it takes more than one time for me to kind of understand it all. And so I need like something quick, something easily understood, something that I don't have to spend a lot of time on and provides a lot of value. And so um, that would just be, I guess my suggestion there would be to, if you want to appeal to younger, busy working people, cut out everything that's not immediate, or make it like 2 levels or something. Like, here, if you have this much time, here's
Yeah.
what's important. Do this.
Okay.
If you have
A good
a
suggestion.
lot of time that you're trying to fill, then you can really dig down into the weeds and really have like, really get involved in all of this stuff. So, and like the legislative recap, the week in review or whatever,
Huh?
I have been enjoying looking at that. I just skim it, but I will say that as someone who's not terribly political, like I look at it, I'm like, I'm not sure, are these national bills? Are these local bills? Are these
Yeah.
state bills? What is this? And so like just here, this is at the state level. You want to contact these people. Here's why we think it's important, like just in a thing. And then also maybe, like, I know it's already kind of filtered down, but sometimes I read it and I think, well, is that something that, like, I know they play a lot of political games, and maybe this is something that's they're trying to, that's just going to go away on its own. I don't need to pay attention to that. But this one really
No,
might
that's always
pass. So pay
yeah,
attention to this one.
yeah,
That kind of thing. So
and
like with minimal time,
yeah,
maximum impact with minimal time.
I think it's an excellent suggestion because we want to give out so much information, and then information could be there, but click to that. So it's really simple,
yeah,
like you said. So somebody would contact their legislature because they know exactly what you want them to do.
yeah.
And
it's
it's
a
not,
benefit and a curse of our website, because when we got off our old platform that expired, this one was much more geared to organizations like ours, and as a result, it's loaded.
Yeah.
And so, you know, on the one hand, it's got all kinds of features and it's very useful for many things. And it does need maybe something on the front page that says, you want to know about us, and in a 5-minute read, here it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
Yeah,
and
it's
I
like-
like your idea of the sort of tiered, you know, here are the things that you can do if you've got this much time a week, and here are the things you got more. You know, people like me who are retired can maybe spend a little more time than somebody who's working and whatnot. I will say this, a legislative recap, which is at the state level, just moving forward, it's all state.
That's good enough.
And I wish there was, I wish there was a magic crystal ball that we could see what the legislators were actually trying to accomplish. Because if you've followed any legislatures for any period of time, they are magicians at hiding the things they really want to do, and bringing them up very late at night or weird,
I know.
weird times like that, and then and then taking action, getting enough people in the room, they can take action, and then it's done. And in the meantime, they dangle all this other stuff in front of you. So that's to what you're talking about. There's a whole lot of stuff that sounds horrible and gets everybody's attention, and then in the meantime, they sneak through the stuff that they really want. So just kind of know that that's an obstacle to that. But I do understand that we need to be better at saying, this really doesn't seem like it stands a good chance. So let's focus our attention, and I think that is particularly true when you're talking about voter rights, because that's one of the things they have a tendency to tag on to other things. And so you'll think it's a bill about election funding or something like that, about, dealing with the clerks and stuff. And then, oh, by the way, they're adding another requirement to you to go be able to vote, or putting a hindrance in. If you just joined in December, you weren't here a couple of years ago when there was a direct attack on the League of Women Voters for registering voters, and they had this whole hoop that we had to jump through. Everybody had to be trained in a certain way, and it just took hours and hours, and a whole bunch of us did it. And then, and of course, we challenged it in court, and then the court threw the whole thing out. And so, it was just a whole
But after the election,
size and utility. and they do that. I mean, there are people in government who just do that just to create, some havoc and turmoil. Okay, what else, Cindy? I haven't heard much from you.
Hi, Jim. And I had sat in on a couple of other sessions, and then I had a session, led a group last night, and we had 2 people,
Oh,
conversationalists. So
Yeah.
we got some work done. But I wanted to sit in today to really listen to more voices. But when I attended Rita Golden's discussion, and we were asked to name 3 things that were of import, I asked, well, voter registration just be an assumption, because that's the baseline. And she said, no, if it's important, it has to be one of the 3.
Yeah.
So
I agree
I
with
will say,
Yeah.
I absolutely, and that's not something that's ever going to go away. That will always be important. And I think that our activities in that area, especially with new citizen ceremonies and so forth, has only increased in the last couple of years. One thing, though, that I was remembering is that it's been, for me, at least a couple of years, maybe even up to 2 or 3 years ago, since we did a voter registration at a high school, and that was at Rockhurst. And I tried, through a friend of mine who's at Pembroke, to try to get something on their campus about a year or so ago, and it really didn't go anywhere. Well, we did that. We've done that before, so we're not going to do that again. But I know that one of the threads that I have heard repeatedly in all of these discussions has to do what I think of as the general umbrella of voter education, but emphasis on the youth. And by youth, I mean high school, getting ready, at least, 17, getting close to being voting age, but from a civics understanding point of view, any age is critical. And of course, to the college level. So I know we've got a couple of programs, especially with AC, and those are in the really early stages, and hopefully that will grow. Jim, I have a question about something I seem to remember a work meeting where we were trying to compile contact information for all the social studies teachers. And one
Yes.
question that has really come up, and I've wondered because I don't have access to school curriculum, is civics, government, are classes taught in schools?
They are.
Is
and
that a
they're-
requirement?
Yeah, that's a graduation requirement, is that you have to have 2
Still
semesters.
is. Well, that's good to know.
It depends
But
on the state, I believe.
What's that?
I think it depends on the state.
Well, in Missouri.
In
DESE
Missouri it is, and that's, I
Right.
think, where some of the confusions come
Yeah.
in, that some
Yeah.
states aren't requiring it, because I talked to some civic teachers in Missouri and was reassured that, yes, it's
Yeah.
being taught.
Yeah,
so
no,
I would,
I've been having taught in Missouri for 15 years. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a
yeah,
requirement.
and
for this.
we need to confirm with our members because I've heard
Mhm.
it's being taught anymore. But I'm not sure where they're getting their information.
The other thing too is that the fact that there's a class that's certified for graduation in government, and whether the students get the knowledge that you and I got when we were through high school, maybe 2 separate things. I had a really weird experience when I always did a unit with my juniors in language arts 3. I taught English. But we would, in the second semester or first semester, excuse me, whenever it was an election year, so every other year I would do this. We would do I would divide them. I would use a political compass test to divide them into 4 parties: Republican, Democratic, Green, and Libertarian. And then we would spend 6 weeks going issue by issue. 1 week on the economy, 1 week on healthcare, 1 week on foreign policy, so on and so forth. And they would and have a debate at the end of the week between the candidates, and everybody had a role. And what I found was that I had a number of students who, after we went through that, who came up to me and said, "Well, I think I learned more about our government's workings in this class than I did in my government class," which that kind of, I mean, it made me feel good that we were doing that, but it kind of made me a little nervous about what they were teaching at the other end of the hall. And so I question sometimes. I mean, the class meets the requirements of the DESE, but do they get this sense that we got? I think when we went through that, hey, everything depends on you being involved. I think so many young people are just like, yeah, nothing depends on us being involved. And that's where I think we really need to try to put an emphasis. That
I'm gonna
being
have
said,
to leave, sorry, and I'm.
okay, yeah, and I'm
going
so
out.
sorry that I started late, and I'm glad I got your input before you.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. But all that being said, I think that we're having trouble getting into schools now because the league, we're at a time now when people who are extremists label groups like ours that are nonpartisan as partisan, because we stand up for things like voter rights and things like that they don't necessarily believe in. That a person who believes that elections were stolen because of dead people voting or because of immigrants voting, illegal aliens voting in our elections, don't want us to come around and provide education to people about how to register to vote and help them get registered to vote. That's what happened 2 years ago. I think, Cindy, you were involved in that when we had to go through all that training and stuff. And so, whereas we were once, I mean, I remember when I was in high school and my mother was the president of the league in Emporia. You know, they came in, you know, every other year, and we did a mock election, and you know, we got to go in there. They set up the same voting booths at the county. I mean, they just got the county voting booths and set them up around the high school, and you know, you got to go in and cast your vote. And they did the whole thing where they registered your ballot and all that stuff. And it was the literally, you know, the test versions of the ballots that the county used. And so, I mean, it was just a great thing. But the schools now, there's a big push among certain political entities to keep the league out of that, because they're viewing us now as a partisan player, even though we work very hard not to be. So that's just something to consider. And maybe we need to figure out how we can help our brand to look, you know, to
Yes.
appear to be.
I don't think you're gonna have any luck with that, convincing people that we're not partisan. I mean, this has been part of the league's issues for decades.
I don't think we will, because the issues we support tend to be more liberal than the ones conservatives support. And it's not that we're partisan, but our leanings are that way. And I would not be in this organization if we leaned the other way, you know. I mean, I can understand, we're nonpartisan, but I can understand why they don't trust us, why they want to get rid of us, why they don't want us educating youth, for example. Can I say one more thing before we go on? My third thing that I was going to say to concentrate on this year, and it's the same one, I put it down as protect democracy, but I'm thinking of things like the legislative effort in Missouri to stop the citizen initiative petitions, or if they pass, to not have, you know, not legislate them, to not allow them to be. And there's probably many other examples, so I just put it down as protecting democracy. But I think that it's an ongoing issue with this legislature. I'm thinking more of positions we have that will be legislated that we oppose or support, hence the importance of the legislative bulletin. You know, it would be good to have maybe stars by the ones that are close to passing or something, but I think that's one of our most important communications we get from our local league is that. And those are the three, I think I mentioned the three things I thought we should emphasize. So I'll back out.
Okay, no, appreciate the input. Absolutely. Okay, are we satisfied with those instructions to the league as we move forward?
Your point about the pushback on the league in schools. I wish we had some, I mean, it's so easy for us to be convinced, but I wish we had some lesson plans, some sort of documented content about our intent of what we want to see taught. There's probably stuff around, but you know, the point is of just the legislative processes, the voting, what basic voter requirements. I don't know. I'm stumbling here, but something that could be hold up and say, this is all we're doing, and you know, make it the kind of thing that everybody could look at and say, well, I don't really see what's wrong with that, as opposed to having it being sort of a rhetorical contest.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I think maybe,
I mean, your experience, to me, first of all, regardless of the topic level, you're the kind of teacher I would have loved to have had, because anybody that can make the process more vivid and more personal and more engaging while you're in the classroom is a winner.
yeah. And I mean, I felt like I had there was actually a social studies teacher and the librarian that I worked with on that project, and I mean, I in all the years that I taught, there were only a couple of teachers that I thought were outside of that mold of engagement and whatnot.
Right. Good.
So and they were
Yeah.
they were
Never mind.
let's just say they were the more senior of the staff members, which I,
Among seniors now, I'd be careful.
and it's funny as you approach retirement, and you start to realize that now you're one of those that they're talking about. It's probably just as well that you exit the stage instead of become the hindrance to progress. So that's what I did. I would think the other thing, though, if we're going to talk about legislative process and things like that in terms of lesson plans, I think we maybe I'm had a conversation with my mentor this morning that maybe we need to just talk about some basic constitutional concepts. I think that
Starting there, yes.
I am amazed when you brought up Doge, which of course I don't know if you saw the news this morning. There was a court ruling concerning Doge where the administration assured us that Elon Musk is in fact not in charge of Doge, and that he is simply a senior advisor to the president.
Yeah, nothing to see here, right?
Of course, they didn't identify who was in charge of Doge, so we're still kind of at a loss. But I think that I think that my concern is the unconstitutionality of how much of what's happening, and the fact that the Constitution gives sort of power divided between Congress, the federal judiciary, and the executive equally, and yet it seems to have been ceded by Congress for sure, and maybe even to a certain extent by the federal judiciary, and so that then makes it we're not a constitutional democracy anymore if they're not exercising their constitutional authority. And I think that a lot of people maybe don't understand exactly the value of the Constitution and why we should be protecting the Constitution. So maybe I think that would, if we're going to try to talk about lesson plans and stuff, I think that maybe would be a critical part of that.
Yeah. I mean, people are throwing the term the Constitution around a lot here.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the word unprecedented or a variety of other statements that pretty soon people tune it out.
Yeah.
And sort of the impact starts to drop away. And
well,
and so you have to kind of reintroduce it in very simple ways over and over.
And I think sometimes it's very easy when something has been protected by a judge because of the Constitution. So, for instance, LGBTQ rights. I think it's very easy then for something, for instance, that young lady who was a swimmer who had competed all her life and got to the college, sort of top of the pier, and then that guy who had transitioned and couldn't win as a male competitor transitioned and became a female competitor and immediately blew everybody away. There's some of those sort of egregious anecdotal examples that then can be latched onto, and we can say, okay, then see, this is the problem with all that constitutional stuff. And it isn't the problem with all that constitutional stuff, right. But it's really easy then for people to get kind of a hold of a story like that, and there are a lot of them, somebody who were same-sex married and then got divorced. Oh my God, or there's just, and you don't look at the other side of it and say, well, what's the divorce rate among, heterosexuals? Is 50-some-odd%.
We've been beat over the head with woke and defund the police now for years, and it's done so much damage while missing the point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, so I think sort of a constitutional, I think that certainly would be something that we we could benefit our society collectively, which is, I think, what we're talking about.
Going back
And
to,
get voters, which I think is what Teresa, sorry, you're on.
to a much
That's
earlier
fine.
comment about the ERA, I think, we had that meeting, the last meeting about the ERA, and frankly, I'd forgotten that it had been ratified.
Yeah,
And I didn't really know. So with the question of what now, sort of like a light bulb went off. Well,
Yeah.
boy, if that doesn't need a lot more airing and getting the message out, I don't know what is. As an example of constitutional right
yeah,
that we had to go to the trouble to, point fingers at. It should have been de facto given, but not.
yeah.
Sandy, about that ERA, because I found it interesting because I did not know that stuff. I think the problem with the ERA is that a lot of people are gonna not believe that it passed properly.
Right. Well, that's what I'm
That
saying.
they will argue, well, they went way over what Congress said that they could, and to me, this is an unclear situation. It's clear to some people, but I don't think it's clear to everybody.
That's my point of
that the
bringing back
ERA
up.
passed,
That's my point of bringing back up in the context of the Constitution. Is here's a very fresh issue, very got good legs when it comes to voter attention, and is ripe for actually expanding on and sort of reworking the news and getting it out there. I mean, did it ever get celebrated? I don't know. But
No,
it-
I mean, I'm in the League of Women Voters and I did not know that the ERA passed, and I'm still not sure if that's true. I mean, if
It
it's
did.
real. I guess what
It
I
did.
mean is it real? It may be true, but is it real?
Well, and that depends on, I'm sure, court rulings. Something's going to
Right.
have to make it to the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to say yea or nay.
But there's a on the basis of a deadline, I think somebody, I don't know what the issue was, but there's something that got passed 100+ years after. I
Yeah.
can't remember what the anecdote was.
203 years,
Yeah,
and it was something that James Madison proposed.
right. And so, I'm sure people
I
can
think
pick
was
it
the line
apart,
of
but
succession.
that's a hell of an example.
Yeah, I think it was line of succession, which is what?
Well,
20
anyway, but your point about getting back to the Constitution as a real core
Yeah,
curriculum issue and really getting down to understanding the basics of it and how it's playing out today is
yeah.
perfect.
Okay. All right. So I think the next thing that we want to look at is are the current league positions. I hope that we're all relatively familiar with how to find them. I certainly wouldn't expect all of you to have them all memorized. And this goes a little bit, Teresa, to what you were talking about. Like there's this trying to drink from a fire hose. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But we've actually through the Leadership Academy, that this has been kind of a wonderful learning process for me, even though I'm my sister and I are technically the instructors of the Leadership Academy. It has been a learning process for me that I don't know that everybody in the league understands how positions function for us. This is almost like the constitutional question for the country. Like we have a very set policy about advocating for issues based on our positions, and our positions are based on studies. And so we don't read something in the news today and say, okay, we have a position on it tomorrow. And I think there are a lot of people who don't understand that. And so one of the things that happens to those of us on the communication side of things is we get a lot of pressure sometimes to say, hey, there's this thing that happened, and you've got to, the league has to come out and say this is bad, this is bad. And it's not that we disagree, but it's like we haven't studied it, and so we don't necessarily know whether it's good or bad, because there's always a second side and sometimes a third and fourth side to issues. And things that seem super cut and dry sometimes are not nearly as cut and dry as we'd like them to be. And this is why we do studies to develop positions, so that when we have a position, it has been very well researched and very well thought out, and the membership collectively has looked at it and said, yes, we want this to be a position. So any thoughts about that process in our positions? Sandy, I
Well,
think
a good example will be if we do this study that on the federal judiciary that is coming up, then you'll see how it works,
yeah.
and how we reach positions as a national league.
Yeah. And, locally, we certainly, our most recent study was on talking about voter protections, was on literally the polling station, about security and protection for workers at the polling stations, and protections for voters who are going in, to not have to necessarily run a gauntlet of armed people outside and whatnot. And the committee that studied that did an excellent job, and we adopted a position and actually took it to the state and said, here's our study and here's our position. And the state said, yeah, we're going to adopt that too. And I believe, I'm hopeful that maybe we're going to try to push that even up to the national level. So
The city has an ordinance that is, I guess, partly based on that. What I was going to say, but while I was muted was, and this may be obvious to you, Teresa, but we got local positions, state positions, and national. And before we jump on anything, we look to see what state and national have done already. Sometimes the positions are there, but the content is a little bit out of date. New wrinkles have showed up in that general area, and they need to be improved or amended.
Yeah.
So, and maybe that comes from the state to help amend a position at a higher level up. It depends. But when an issue arises, the first thing you do is look at what's already been done and go from there. It was a great
Teresa,
position.
have you had a chance to review that part of our work?
I'm sorry, were you asking me that?
Yes.
Not in any detail. I understand the concept, and I understand, like, there's, kind of a hierarchy. Like, you can't nobody can contradict the national positions. Then the state is sort of the second tier, and then local. Like, that all makes sense. But as far as like the granular details of each position, no. I mean, I get a gist. I can tell, like, the vibe. I get the gist, but not.
Have you looked at the documents, the actual studies that are current at both state and national?
No, I have not.
There's a summary section, I know, in national, and maybe one in state, where it's down to 2 or 3 pages, and you just got, the topic and the basic essence of the study. It gives you, you can skim through it and say, okay, now I can kind of see what the landscape's like here. So that's useful to do that, just to get a sense of what's out there, what's been out there for a long time.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, I really think I think your website is a great resource, and I think it's sort of a crock pot situation where you got to marinate in a while to really understand it all.
And go back to it.
Yeah. So, I mean,
So
I'm sure it's just
let me just really quickly, if I can figure out how to do this.
Put the link in the chat there.
Who's actually owning this meeting? Who owns this meeting?
You, I would have thought.
I think it's
I
you,
would have thought
Jim.
too, but well, I don't seem to be in charge of it. Who was the first person who signed on? You may be the.
Maybe Pauline.
Well, Teresa was on before I was, but she's brand new. I don't own anything. I thought our host was.
This is what I want. Okay,
Okay.
this is what I wanted right here.
You got it.
Got it. I got it. Okay. So in this, Teresa, when I first started, this really threw me. Okay. Because our work is where actually a lot of the good stuff is, and including lead positions. And so if you go to lead positions, you have the opportunity to look at both local, state, and national positions. And then there's just some other stuff here. But I just want to show you how to get to the local positions, because this is what they look like. Okay. And this is the most recent one that we did, the election worker intimidation, election, worker, the role of law enforcement, transparency. And what it does is, when we have these positions, then it allows us as an organization to actively advocate for these positions. So we can go out and talk to the legislature and say, you need to pass laws that provide protection for the people who are working at the polls. You need to require law enforcement to enforce these rules, to come out and help protect, so on and so forth. To make challenges to, so that not just anybody can walk up and say, hey, all those 15 people in line there who don't look like me are illegal voters. So it lets us take more direct, meaningful action, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And so, as a bit of feedback, would it be useful to reach more people if you could take a small chunk of this and say, start updating your Facebook page with a feed of, like, or a reel or a story on Instagram or Facebook with, here's a position and why, like one a day or something that people
Like, as
could
a
read in
social
a
media
digestible chunk? Perhaps, yeah, because honestly, I would probably have to be very, very, very interested in something to dive down into a website and read a 3-page document on it. But if it came up on my feed, I could post about it.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow I read
So,
another post about it. And I
yeah.
like just the level of time that I'd be willing to, I mean, I am interested in this, but in my daily life, just sort of people in general wandering around, like, I would across this. And but I find it interesting, and probably, like, if it was served to me on a silver platter while I was scrolling through.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
So would it help if we just in that same vein, like if maybe in the members only newsletter, if we took one chunk?
Maybe, I mean, I'm thinking from my standpoint, you're directing and I don't know how you use the power of, like, uh, marketing to, like, I'm interested in free speech, say, for instance. So, like, they have a position on free speech, and here it is. But I'm not particularly interested in. Oh, I can't think of something right now that I'm not interested in. But let's see, maybe okay, like, well, okay. As a, for instance, I wouldn't say that this is true, but it's not that I'm not interested in it, but I had never really thought about, like, protections for uh poll workers. Something that just a brief mention of that came up. Like, I would never seek that information out, but if
Right.
I happen to cross it, I might be like, well, that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
no, and I do agree with that. Or I never thought
Yeah.
of it. But I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't ever, like, oh, I have 4 hours to kill. I'm gonna go see if I can drill down on and read a 3-page document, and oh, here's a position on. I
Okay.
would have to already be interested in it to spend
Yeah.
that kind of time, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, which isn't to say, like, I certainly, please don't take that as I
Oh,
am not knocking it. I'm really glad somebody is willing to do that. It's just not something that I would have thought to look for.
yeah. Yeah. No, I really appreciate the feedback. I think that's, you know, it's hard sometimes because so many, quite frankly, there are so many people who are just dedicated, like lifetime dedicated to the league, and it's like you see them at everything. That it's good to hear from somebody who's like, I want to do stuff, but it's not going to be my wake up and spend all day thinking of the league thing. So no, it's excellent feedback. So I really appreciate it.
Can I
Well,
just
and
say
I
something
think
real
Sandy
quick?
mentioned something about, oh,
Oh, I just wanted to say something real quick. Our positions, we have a lot of them on a lot of issues, I know. And they are written in a sort of a general way to allow us maximum response, For example, and some of them are national positions. For example, we did a study on immigration a few years ago. So we have a position on immigration, and it's a national position that would be on the impact on issues. You could read that if you're interested in what we think, the league thinks of immigration. And we have one on agriculture, a position on agriculture that was also a national study. It was an updated study because there were so many new issues in agriculture, I'm just saying there's a lot of positions any you're interested in, you might find that we have one, crime, juvenile detention, and also on the state level we have that. He was just showing you a local study that we just recently did. That's all I want to say.
well, thank you.
We have a
And I'll say,
potpourri of positions.
And
well, I
Sandy,
think
oh,
Sandy mentioned something like earlier, like, well, if you've watched legislator stuff for any amount of time, and my thought to that was, I have not, and
yeah,
have no, like, that's not something I would be familiar with. That's not to say I'm not interested in contributing,
right.
but all of that is um not something I would have already known as background knowledge.
Well, that's why I continue to say, there are people that, as Jim says, wake up and live and breathe this every day. And there are people that are in it, have their toes in it, and are happy with that area. I'm good with all of that. I think it's critical that all organizations allow various levels of involvement based on levels of interest in topics. So to me, the more the merrier, and any involvement is good involvement. So that's my mantra for organizations generally.
No, and I don't know of anybody who doesn't believe that, particularly in the leadership of the league.
Some people feel a little self-monitoring about, well, I'm not as involved as I should be.
Yeah.
Well, you probably are.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing too is that what we don't want is to overburden anybody to the point that they're terrific for a very short period of time and then they go away. We'd much rather have you, if voter registration, we'd much rather have you do voter registration events here and there for 10 years than than have you do 100 of them in one season and then never do them again.
but one condition I would put on that, this is just me, whatever you're doing in the league, sell the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, and sell it as a resource.
Yeah.
Because you brought up Vote 411. I mean, to me, that's just such an amazing resource.
That's our best brand item aside from voter reg.
Yeah.
That's what I have found to be super valuable, and what I would. That's the reason I joined. That's the reason I joined, and the thing that I probably am most interested in. Everything else, everything kind of just like dipping my. You said toe dipping. I feel like I'm kind of dipping my toe in, like, what am I interested in? This, maybe not that.
No,
This.
and that's, I mean, it's all stuff that needs to get done. So wherever you are stepping in, wherever your toe is dipped in, is something that needs help. I mean, it's something that needs your time. So,
And
you know,
Vote 411 needs help.
yeah, they
I
do.
think Peg and Pat made that point at the last meeting. You
Yeah.
may have seen that. It's a fair amount of labor intensive stuff. You know, whether it's entering data prior to the election on this fairly interesting website to get it all to be
Yeah,
you know, consistent with what all the ballots look like in the 4 counties in the city. So I've done that a number of times in the past, and it's just one of those kinds of things where, you know, it's a bit of a work party, but it's very interesting, and they count on that. So if that aligns with your general, you know, book on 411, then being kind of in that part of the deal is would be good.
Well, thank you.
okay.
Very helpful.
We're right about at the 1 hour mark, which is where we want to be. I want to give each of you an opportunity to make sure, Teresa, that have we heard all from you that you wanted us to hear?
And more. Like
Okay.
I had no preconceived thoughts.
Okay, well, good, and that's very much what we were looking for, was no preconceived ideas. So Pauline, are we? Is there anything?
I said what I wanted to and more, and
Okay,
I think this was a good meeting, you know.
good. Well, it would have been a better meeting. Started it on time, so, and I do want to thank Sandy, by the way. Sandy texted on the slide and said, "Where are you?" And
Oh, I did Cindy. I didn't.
oh, Cindy did. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was when she said Sandy. By the way, everybody here has my wife's phone number, just so you know that. You're always talking to my wife. I thought she said, "Do you know Sandy?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And she said, "I think the meeting started." So,
Oh, gosh, that's good to know that goes to,
Yeah.
goes to her.
So by the way, you're just like my students, because my yearbook students always had my phone number, but they also had my wife's phone number because she was much more reliable on the phone than I was. But anyway, Sandy, did we
We're good.
catch everything? Cindy, are we good?
Good.
Okay. Boy, this was wonderful. This was some excellent stuff, and I really do
Yes.
appreciate your input. I think this was, I think Cindy would attest to this. This was different than what we were getting in some of the other ones, and so and that's good. We want to get a broad look at things, and so we can then sort through and say, you know, what can we present? So really appreciate your time,
And thanks for having some Zoom meetings about this. Obviously today it's really critical, but
yeah,
I was saying to Cindy that, you know, it's program planning is always you know, hard to get everybody involved.
yeah,
And this is a good way to do it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you set these up.
yep. I will
Yeah.
pass that on. All right.
Yeah.
Well then,
Thank you
Thank you,
all
Tim.
for your time.
Teresa, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all as
Yes.
well.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the league. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah.